Hi again, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, September 12th. I am joined by our all-star panel of top local journalists, Christina McDermott of the Santa Barbara Independent, her independent colleague, Ryan P. Cruz, and beaming in from outer space, Josh Molina, man of many hats and host of the global sensation podcast, Santa Barbara Talks. Thanks you all for coming. So, Christina, we've been talking for it seems endlessly about this eight story blockbuster tower proposed to be built behind the mission. And this week there was an interesting new development where State Senator Monique Limon sort of quietly got involved. And I don't know, are we cheering? Are we not cheering? What exactly did she do?
So she's put in some legislative language that sort of de-exempts projects that may have been exempt from CEQA review or environmental review. But the language is very specific for what things would not be exempt from the exemption, I guess. So I guess I'll back up to say in June, there was legislation passed that essentially exempts some infill, urban projects from undergoing environmental review if they're residential projects. Actually, not just residential, there's some other language in there too, but that was kind of the focus on the housing question. And then Lamone's language sort of puts a very specific subset of parameters on things that actually wouldn't be exempt. Um, and that subset really, from what I can tell, really only applies to the eight-story building. It's for counties of a certain size in which I think only Santa Barbara and Monterey fit. And on top of that, so it's cities of a certain size, which Santa Barbara fits, within counties of a certain size, which Santa Barbara fits, for properties that are, more than 4 acres with wetland and floodplains next to a historical landmark. So I think I got all of them. But it's like a very specific subset for the eight-story building, really.
Yeah, I mean Ben Christopher of Cal Matters scooped on this. He discovered what was going on, and I think at first blush, and certainly the way it looks from Sacramento, and the way the narrative is, oh, this is a powerful Democrat trying to do favors for her rich constituents. But I think if as you point out, it follows on a big change in the CEQA law, the California Environmental Quality Act, which they rolled back on a lot of development in June as part of the budget agreement, and so this adds, I think, as I understand it, another amendment to that cleanup language about how they're changing CEQA. And the conditions that you just listed, which are 4 acres, wildland area, floodplain, all of seem like pretty good ideas to me to be doing some environmental um, uh, assessment about what's going on. So I think on the one hand, she kind of got caught with her hand in a cookie jar. On the other hand, she's doing the right thing. So at least from where I sit, more power to you, Monique. Do we know whether I mean, it's such an insane time in the legislature right now. It's the last days of session.
Mhm.
Supposedly, things are going to end at midnight tonight, but I'm pretty sure they'll go into tomorrow to do some other stuff, some last minute stuff. It should be so funny. We'd be up there, and what they would literally do is they would suspend what time it is. They would suspend what time. It would be midnight would have arrived, but they wouldn't. They would say that midnight had not yet arrived, so they could go to 2 or 3 in the morning. So it's really a crazy time. So if she doesn't get it in this bill, I guarantee she'd get it in another. I won't guarantee. I'll say chances are 6 in 10 that it passes. But anyway, nice work trying to untangle that whole thing. Ryan, you were mentioning a possible scenario on this thing. I mean, I sent Ben Christopher a note and complained about his lack of local context to any of this. Because even if you take I think the most virulent YIMBY people nobody in town is going to be for this project. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not, something that's Monique is doing for her rich constituents. She's doing it for the people. But you were suggesting that these shady developers who we never seem to be able to get in touch with might be just wanting to sell the property.
I mean, to this day, we haven't seen them complete a built project, and in Santa Barbara, let alone anywhere else. Santa Barbara is really hard to build in, and they have that other project over on Grand Avenue, and it seems that there's a lot of poker chips being used in this eight-story building, to where we don't know if it's gonna get built. They keep saying that they have the right to build it, and legally they're gonna fight that tooth and nail till the end. But it might be a way to sell and make a little bit of more money than they bought the property for. And it makes it really hard for somebody to kind of come out against this bill too, right? Because then you're standing on the side of somebody who wants to build an eight-story building right behind a mission in California, and so it's kind of it makes it really hard to kind of stand up against this too.
Yeah, someone who's not from here who won't answer our phone calls. Now, Christina, you said at one point that the developer actually was going to talk to you this week.
Yeah, at one point, the manager of the development team was gonna speak to me today, but I got a message saying that because the bill is still pending, that they don't want to do that today. So I'll reach out and see if they want to talk
Oh,
next week
they're
or
going to talk to
if
you
they're not
tomorrow then.
speaking.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
um, they have been they haven't been as public as most other projects. I think it's
Christina,
fair to
you are the master of understatement, I have to say.
say.
Really, you're so nice.
Yeah, they have
It's,
been it's
it's
been
that
quiet.
NPR background of yours. You're so nice to everybody. That's good. We need a little bit on this show. Hey, Josh, so elsewhere on the housing front, now we another story that we've been following, so-called adaptive reuse of older buildings downtown that are going to be converted to housing, and what are the requirements and the regulations going to be on that? And I guess the supervisor, the city council approved something this week, but if you're going to do a project like this, you don't have to build any market rate or workforce housing. It's okay, just build it all for rich people because Ben Romo says so.
Mm.
I got
Um,
that right?
Pretty much, yeah, that's exactly right. So there's only been a couple of these projects that have been downtown. So we've got commercial retail on the bottom, and some developers are saying, "Hey, why don't you let us build higher, and we could build some housing?" And the city, the cost it is to sort of overhaul and adaptively reuse these very oddly shaped spaces makes it not really, there's not a lot of opportunity there. So the Yardy brothers, who their political advisor is Ben Romo, they've done a couple of projects and they're saying, we would love to do more. Other developers would love to do more. But really, when we go in there and we have to put an inclusionary unit in a development that has sort of like 8 units or something, it's really expensive. And so, if you want housing, you should exempt the downtown central business district from the city's 10% inclusionary policy. And what they're saying is, when they put an inclusionary unit above Sur La Table and they want to do it over on Carrillo, the old Pacific Coast Times building, I have trauma trigger just saying those words. They're saying that they get like a 5% return, and no developer is going to go into business to do a 5% return. So what they're saying is, for downtown, let's just build the housing, but you're actually going to stop development if you make us include inclusionary. Now, most of the council wants inclusionary. Most of the council says, what you say makes sense, but there has to be a way to include inclusionary housing. They're also saying, well, why don't you pay some in lieu fees, but they're doing a separate study that isn't available yet. It's supposed to be available this fall, but it's not. So there was a vote, and they directed staff to like bring it all together and then come back and they'll take another vote on it. But the question is, should developers be able to adaptively reuse these commercial buildings downtown? You keep the retail on the first floor and you build housing on top. Should we relax all of the standards for setbacks, which the council wants to do? And should we relax inclusionary? And the majority of the council says no. And the Yardy brothers, Ben Romo, they say, well, fine. If you don't, you're just not going to get anyone who's going to do it. So that's where it's at right now. Now,
So
council
did they
member,
vote? I'm confused. So did they vote to relax the requirements or
yeah,
not,
yeah, they voted to relax in terms of
including the inclusionary
setbacks.
housing?
What?
Including the inclusionary?
Everything but inclusionary, right? They are saying we want to keep inclusionary housing as part of this, but they relaxed other things such as front setbacks, open space requirements. They're saying that's fine, but we want you to include inclusionary.
And I
Megan
think
Harmon, sorry, one last thing. Megan Harmon sides with Ben Romo and the Yardy brothers.
Yeah,
She
because she's not
says
running again.
she says that we have to be practical and we have to look at what these developers are saying, that it's a very narrow margin if you include the inclusionary. And so she's sort of siding with them right now, saying just build the housing. That's going to be better than nothing from her perspective. So that was a little bit of the kind of the surprise on that vote.
So what was the vote, Ryan?
technically the vote was 5-2, and they're directing staff to come back. So the ordinance is not adopted right now. This ordinance and these policies aren't in place. The direction is to come back with the draft of the ordinance with the specific. The inclusionary is not taken out, but they want to put a cap at it, saying that maybe if you have under 25 units or a number that's going to be recommended by staff, if you have a smaller building, that you can might be exempted. Now, the problem might be what people are arguing, and what Josh has kind of pointed out is that if you take out the inclusionary altogether, if they do this separate study that they're doing, and the study finds that, hey, for between 1 to 20 units, it might be a better thing to have them do an in lieu fee. It's going to be a hard task to rewrite that back into the ordinance after the fact and ask developers to pay an in lieu fee that they weren't asked to pay before when the ordinance was passed. So I think the timing made it pretty difficult for everybody. And then the inclusionary, downtown, it's really difficult to build. We understand that, but there's also gonna be a gentrification and gonna be a segregation of low-income housing downtown. We saw that in Paseo Nuevo, where the low-income housing, for tax credits, and we know that housing authority to do it has to build it on a separate parcel. But we're seeing luxury housing in another building with nice, and they have a pool and everything, and we're seeing low income housing stuffed over to the corner somewhere. And this removing that inclusionary 10% in this, even in this small adaptive reuse specific place, is kind of furthering that a little bit more, and just making it difficult for me or anybody else who doesn't make a lot of money to live downtown where we need to be.
Yeah, and this is part of the reason my head explodes every time I hear the phrase housing crisis. It's an affordable workplace housing shortage, is what it is.
There's
And
plenty of
so,
housing.
if that's, supposed to be the target that everybody's at, and God knows Kristen Snedden never stops saying that, all of a sudden now we're going to build downtown, which was going to be the future of all of us. And except we're going to, exempt that. It's crazy. All right, a lot of going on the housing front this week, Christina, because you had another piece about this project out in IV, which my eyebrows went up because I saw our old friend Ed St. George there. I thought he'd left town. I guess not.
He owns a lot in Ivy.
Josh heard his name and he had to run.
He had to run, or maybe Ed took him out. Who knows? But now they're going for a fifth hearing on this. Is that
Yeah.
the maximum? Is that as many as you're allowed to have, according to Senator Weiner, or what?
Yes. Yeah. They had 3 hearings on this from the Planning Commission earlier in the spring. And then it was appealed. The Planning Commission approved it 3-2, so kind of a narrow vote. It was appealed by two.
Is this the county planning
Yeah,
commission?
county. Isla Vista, it's an island essentially. In its of itself, it's got UCSB on 3 sides, the ocean on the 4th, and it's unincorporated. So it's always county. which makes it simple in a way. But yeah, it was narrowly approved by the Planning Commission, and then it was appealed, and so the Board of Soups heard it this week, and they actually punted it for a fifth hearing, basically hoping to work more with St. George and his partner, Isla Vista Church, to try and get more
What's
concessions.
the hang up? What's the central conflict?
Parking, 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 parking.
Because,
The
go ahead.
idea being that Ivy is so inundated with on-street parking, not well, with lack thereof, actually, that it could pose adding this many bedrooms with not as many parking spaces is going to add to the existing problem and compound it. And this is really just one project. I had Travis Seward give me a rough estimate of how many housing projects have been in IV since 2020, and there's been approximately 54 of them, 44 ADUs, so mostly ADUs, but then 10 multifamily projects roughly. And IV is, it's dense and it's in half a mile of a transit stop. So legally, you don't need to provide any parking for any of the projects.
Ah, unless
And
CEQA apply.
well, they're all urban infill, and so they're CEQA exempt, really. And this Sueño project actually does provide some parking. I believe it provides 27 spaces. But the argument is that's not enough, given
20,
that
I'm sorry, 27 spaces for how many units?
um, let me see, I think it is
40,
45
45,
bedrooms.
yeah, that's what I thought.
And generally in IV, again, this was actually another discussion point that I don't think they're going to come to solution with in the near future, but technically you're supposed to provide 80 square feet of bedroom space per person in IV. I don't think that happens that much because people triple up, double up, triple up, quad up.
They each have a
Livability.
car.
Yeah, and not everybody has a car actually, but a lot of students do. They use it to go to work and they use it to go grocery shopping often. Um, and they do need somewhere to park. And so the some of the streets in IV during the school year, this like recent study has shown are at over 100% capacity
Yeah.
frequently. And like I live by there. Everybody parks in the red zones. There's no enforcement really. So there is a problem there. On the flip side, you do have in IV people double, tripling, quadding up in these buildings that were built in 1960 and were considered old and, falling apart in 1980. And now you have 30 people living in, one unit or a big unit or something. So it's a real crunch.
This is a University of UCSB problem. I mean, it's great that we're thinking about building housing for students and oh, they need parking. Apparently they need parking, but other adults don't need parking. But I mean, the real story of this is just the systematic driving out of Mexican American and Hispanic and Asian families from Isla Vista. If you look back 25, 30, 40 years, Isla Vista was not a college town where developers came in and packed students into rooms like Ed St. George does. They have systematically driven out these. It was a low income, affordable community for people to
Yeah,
live
well,
in,
that's
I mean, so that's I mean, it is not right to drive out those families. And for somebody who's been in UCSB for or in Isla Vista a few years, you have no idea that community, how vibrant that community was, the history of that community with Latino families. So, I mean, it's fine. We need to build more housing. But for me, I wish we could put it in a broader context, which is we have families that cannot afford to live in Isla Vista. It's the last place of truly affordable housing along Abrego, along those apartments. And, in 10 years, they'll all be gone because these developers are just trying to pack students in. And yes, UCSB is doing better, but they had to get sued by the county and Goleta to do so. So I just get a little annoyed at sort of the surface level discussion of parking and housing in Isla Vista when these activists, everybody seems to forget not everybody, but a lot of the recent people forget that history.
Yeah, but I think you can even go back further. I mean, and again, I'm not 80, but IV in 1954, like,
Easy,
it was,
easy. Let's not be
no, but it
down
was,
on
I
people
think
that are
it's,
80. Don't be mean to people who are 80.
no, I think there is a real wave going on. Like, it's built in the 50s and 60s with all these variances and these exceptions for students. And then you see this drop in student enrollment in the early 70s. And you see this like community that was always there but grows stronger through this time. And then you see it, to Josh's point, over the past like 30 years just being squeezed out. But like the decisions that were made like in the 60s to how to build IV are still plaguing IV in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think that's relevant.
And all of this, and then you go back to what we were talking about last week, Christina, about, oh, we want to have AI jobs, but we don't know how much energy that's going. I mean, all of these, each one of these housing issues that we're discussing raises, just a bushel full of specific individual different criteria and conflicts and controversies. And that's why this needs to be addressed on the local level and not from Sacramento. And that's why this build stuff makes me so crazy. Anyway, that concludes my prepared remarks. Hey, Josh, you had another big scoop from SB CAG. Ooh, can't imagine where that one came from. About rent data. Things worse than we thought.
So there's a housing dashboard. It's actually not new. It was released earlier this year, but they've been recently sort of promoting it. And it's based off of data up until 2023. And there's a lot of great stuff there. It comes from the state, it comes from census data, it comes from League of Women Voters survey. And essentially, it sort of reaffirms what we already know, but when you look at the graphs and you look at the charts and you look at the data, it's very stark, which is, most of the renters who rent are not renting comfortably. They are considered cost burdened. And a third of renters, or 25% of renters are considered cost burden. Half of them are considered severely. Half of them are considered cost burden, and homeowners much less so. And that goes to that whole thing. Another sad reality is what people pay in rent, just kind of throwing it away to the homeowner. If you're able to get a down payment and buy, you could be sort of paying yourself. People who own homes are much less rent burdened or mortgage burdened. So that data is in there. We also look at where available units are. Montecito has a lot of housing, right? They're just not renting that housing. And that's really stark. Guadalupe, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, Goleta, you can look at all of these different communities and see what the availability of housing is, how many people live in these units. Not surprisingly, Guadalupe, Santa Maria, you have multiple people who are living in units, more so than Montecito or even Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara's got a little bit of the problem, so does Goleta. So you can really break it down by community and see where people live, how many people are living in those communities, how much of their income they are spending on rent or mortgage. There's demographic data as well. And really the other thing, which I'm going to work on, is there's a lot of stories in that dashboard, right? There's countless. The amount of vacation rentals that are in this town that are going unused is a tragedy. I mean, in Montecito alone, most of this housing is for, sort of second homes, people who have these homes vacant or vacation rentals, and in Santa Barbara. And so there's all of that data, and it's kind of fascinating. What's also cool about what they did, and it's actually Mia Lewis at SBCAG who put together the visualizations, and they're easy to see. Click on the different cities, different charts come up. So imagine all the data that's out there in one place. So that's kind of cool as well. Now it's only up to 2023. What's changed? It's only gotten worse probably so far this year. So they're going to update it again in January.
All right. Um, Ryan, you had a piece, I think posted Tuesday, about kind of community planning and discussion that's going around about this surge in ICE agents that we're expecting to see. What's the story there?
Yeah, people are expecting in October ICE to get that $170 billion budget, which 30 million is going towards enforcement operations, which is these masked men we're seeing in vehicles pop out and get people on in the streets, and also just the Supreme Court decision earlier this week really it was disheartening to a lot of folks in the community. The Supreme Court kind of standing by and legally making it okay for an officer on the ground with,
Well, for the time being,
for the
didn't
time being, right? Lifting that restraining order, that,
it's not the
allows
law of the land yet, is what I'm saying.
Exactly. Yeah, and but we've seen over and over again that ICE has not been following the law of the land that was written
Anyway,
before. So, um, but it really is just a lot of fear of the other shoe coming down. We haven't had a lot of there's still been a couple arrests. There was 2 arrests last week and here in Santa Barbara. Yesterday there was an event out in Samis, which is outside Ventura County, and I think 30 different vans, HSI, showed up, and some 805 and DocuFund legal observers went out, and there was almost a standoff out there on the streets, and nobody was arrested. 805 and DocuFund, counted it as a win that their legal observers showed up, and it wasn't a protest. It was just kind of standing there and recording and making sure there was people wearing HSI vests and in unmarked vans and cars, and they eventually left the scene without arresting anybody. So. But things like that is just heightening the fear even more. And then of course there's another 45 million that's going to expand detention centers. And Salud Carbajal was able to visit our local one. He wasn't able to see much. He told me that nobody was there when he went through his visit. But this place typically can hold 24 folks, and they promised that they didn't ever process children there, and that everybody has water and food when they need it. But of course, he didn't get to see
well,
it.
and I mean, he told me that what he heard from the supervisors or the administrators up there was, "Hey, we don't know what's coming out of Washington. Half this stuff is just being
That
driven
and
by out of Stephen Miller's alleged brain."
That's
And
the hardest part about all this. As a journalist, we lean on our sources and these trusted sources, which the federal government for my whole life has been someone that when you get a press release or you can reach out to a public information officer, they can give you information, at least information that's solid, objective figures, and this was the person. These are the amount of people that were arrested in your county. Salute Carbajal, the supervisors. They have all asked ICE for information, the federal government for information, and have received, nothing. There's a FOIA request currently with ICE for information, and supervisors have asked an ICE official to show up. And right now, the official answer is they're searching for records. So there's not anything really
well,
coming out of that
I
yet.
mean, we got to keep the pressure on Salud. I've taken to Salud posts endlessly on Facebook. Oh, I had ice cream in Ventura County with the assistant city administrator. So every time I see Salud on Facebook, I now post the same thing. I say, "This is your periodic reminder. It's not 2014 anymore."
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, he needs to step up. All right, we got to get out of here. But one last thing I wanted to mention, Josh. I almost injured my neck reading one of your stories about State Street this week. About it, it said that there was going to be northbound traffic coming, and then in the very next paragraph, it said, "Oh, wait a minute, Kelly just called and said no, no, no." What was the story behind that story?
That's funny. That was classic Josh reporting. So my sources, there is this effort to reopen State Street, one lane going northbound.
With which all right-thinking people agree. Yes.
That's a play. They're being strategic about how they're going to unfold this. And I have been told this by people at City Hall, people outside of City Hall. So I reported that. And then Kelly, after the story was published, just sort of, messaged me and said, there is no plan at this time to do this. So I just kind of added that, just since.
And with a time stamp on that, she was.
Yeah, I wanted people to know that it was updated. I did say updated. with all due
So
respect
is
to
she
city
just being
administrator,
politically cautious because there's not 4 votes for it yet?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what her thing is other than people in power and government don't like journalists to get ahead of the narrative of the stories they want to tell. I mean, she asked me to take that paragraph out, which is like the worst possible thing you could ever ask me to do. Because even though it's like small, it's Trumpian. It's like, no, if you're in government, do not ask us to remove something because you don't agree with it. Now, I can accommodate, I can update and do all of that. But I mean, what's she going to ask next? Who are my sources? Right. So I just,
I don't think
that
Kelly.
was the story. So we'll see. It may or may not happen, but I know that the downtown business owners are pushing for that, and there's a whole new energy. And I'm sure Ryan has heard it too. So it's not like I'm making this up.
No, I don't think you're making it up at all. And I don't think Kelly would ask for your sources either, honestly.
Good.
I mean, you made her life more difficult. That's why she asked you to take it out. But
Well, I appreciate her contacting me directly, though. That's all. I mean, that's good, and I accommodated her. Yeah.
all right. All right, Christina McDermott, Ryan P. Cruz, Josh Molina, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time on Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.